cameraman who've been totally neglected.
You are occupying upper house now.
And you know I'm the parking is coming. And who's cleaning up this? आप सफाई कर रहे हैं भाई जी?
Come and meet Jamshyd.
You have to pay for my sandwiches.
He complains that whenever he wants a ticket, it is not there.
What was even funny, I was trying to get a Delhi Patna flight. I called him and said, "John, is available? Can you do something about it?" I said, "Friday night, I can manage one ticket." I said, "No, I need three. My team will do it."
I was trying to see specifically on urban water, the energy pumping efficiencies, and what changes can be done. But today I was reading what we earn from next month, late September.
Confirmation.
Ambassador.
Hello, packets for Lisa. Hi. Spanish embassy.
Hi.
I guess it's good. Oh, sorry. My English is not so good.
Suresh, Prabhu also is here. He's the chair.
Hello. Hi. Samir Sari. Pleased to meet you.
I live in Ghaziabad.
Just we should sort that out right now.
Now we are
In a
giving.
month.
The ambassador is coming back.
Yeah, he was nice. But as I was saying, he
Yeah. You just take it.
Thank you very much for having me.
He's the guy.
What next?
That's right, I guess, yeah. The German embassy.
Very good. Thank you very much.
How old is your organization?
This is our second anniversary.
Oh, very young.
Very young, but that's our work.
It looks already sort of very middle class.
Space given to us by Mr. Prabhu. Mr. Gautam Prabhu is one of the principal
Run away for Pooja.
Hi. Hello, Mr. Myra. Thank you for coming.
Mr. Lakshmi Narayan.
Hello. Good to see you again. Hi, Anjana.
We will on your way to see. Actually,
I've been looking into plastic clothes. There are downsides.
I need to do all my last single girl things. And even couple things.
but there are two schemes going. No, that is a Himayat program, which Rural Development Ministry.
Technical advisory board
From point of origin to point of delivery. Some of it is what you will be doing, then there's the transport area, and then there's the port handling capacity. There are so many.
For some reason, something I don't observe. It's very nice.
But you come with us.
How are you? How are you? You see the member planning commission?
And the most knowledgeable one, and the most forward-looking one, the Pratyajit industry.
I need to
Friend of mine. Why I'm like that? Because I follow him.
Follow him.
Yes, I get the knowledge to work. Yes.
Whatever, I just want to sit, talk,
Hi,
and
Peter.
have a chat.
Hi.
I'm Arunabha Ghosh. I'm the President CEO of the council.
No, I'm the last one. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, the other two guys are on our phone, but it's very. How are you?
Once holding before, and the other family. I've known him since 96. No, we live in a different city.
Different world.
So much for
No, I get consulted like yeah, okay, so my wife. Arunabha is from us Please come. Yeah, he should be. I think Mr. Thakur is not here. Mr. Lance is already here. I know. Or at the Bangladesh. That's right.
I agree.
Thank you for coming.
My wife Monica.
Thank you so much.
Are you in town or flying in?
बस से एक बजे तक ठीक है
Perfect.
Very well.
Chief supporter. Chief supporter. What's my
Get you a drink.
Chairperson, and I came back from principal. On the 10th of August, I returned. Great after.
Hi, Kiran. Hi, nice to see you again. Going at 7:30. Reply to you. Thank you very much. Good to see you here. Doing great work. Just pick up your technology. Great work. It's a country, Canadian country.
And then I started talking and
Good evening. May I request those of you who are not seated yet to take your respective places? Good evening. His Excellency Ambassador Shivshankar Menon, the National Security Advisor of India, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, Chairperson of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and former Cabinet Minister of Industry, Power, Environment and Forests, Chemical and Fertilizers, and Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises. Mr. Jamshyd Godrej, co-chairperson of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and chairman of the board of Godrej and Boyce Manufacturing Company. Distinguished guests, welcome to the second anniversary of CEEW. Tonight, the Council on Energy, Environment and Water marks a milestone as it completes 2 years of producing high-quality research, creating partnerships with public and private institutions, and engaging with the wider public to explore sustainable pathways for development in India and across the world. I'm deeply honored to address a room full of distinguished guests like you who have agreed to join us this evening. In my capacity as the Strategic Partnerships Manager at CEEW, I hope that your presence here this evening marks the beginning of a long journey with CEEW. Thank you for celebrating CEEW's anniversary with us. I'd now like to invite Mr. Prabhu to tell you more about his vision for the Council and introduce the National Security Advisor, Mr. Shivshankar Menon.
So good evening, friends. And I must thank you all for coming here. For some of you at a very short notice, particularly to celebrate with us an important event in the life of an institution, which is the second anniversary. All anniversaries are important, but particularly the initial anniversaries are more important. Because if you don't survive in the initial years, you'll not see the long way ahead. And therefore, the second anniversary is an extremely important event in which we thought we must invite our friends, our well-wishers, those who will guide us, and those who will work with us to shape a vision for India, and not just for India, but for the rest of the world, to find out how we can meet some of the major challenges that the humanity is facing today. If you go in any part of the world, you will find people struggling for water. Those parts of the world where there is too much of water, they have a problem because there's too much of water. How do you deal with that? I think some part of India today, there's a doubt. But in some part of India, they're also facing a problem because of water, because there's too much water. In a place like Rajasthan, which used to be known as the desert state, I think after some time, if somebody says in a school exam that Rajasthan is a desert state, probably will not get marks because it is now becoming like a flooding state. So these are the challenge of water is always there in any part of the world. Environment, which is now becoming a very important issue in almost all parts of the world, whether it's a developed nation, industrialized countries, or poor nations, developing countries. All of them face these challenges. And energy, which is in fact now again, after so many years of having discovered fossil fuels, now we are realizing that we will need energy. Without that, we can't survive. But we need type of energy which is not going to create a type of problems that the use of fossil fuel is creating. And therefore, energy, environment, and water have become one of the most important issues for the humanity. And these issues wouldn't have become as challenging as they are now had we probably married them together and created a policy framework in which we could implement each one of them in an integrated manner. But as we normally see, that each of these is implemented in a very compartmentalized manner. Particularly in India, we have a very good number of ministries who deal with water, 13 of them. Energy, only 8, 9 of them. But fortunately, environment only 1. But that's good. Having been a minister of all these 3, I know that rarely we have any connection with the other ministries. Till I went into that ministry, I was always thinking that that ministry is responsible for my problem. But then I said, then I was a problem because I was in that ministry before. So how do you actually integrate energy, environment, and water into issues at policy formulation and also at the implementation of them? And therefore, this organization, which is Council for Energy, Environment, and Water, actually tries to address these issues. And as I said, it's an Indian organization formed in India, but a think tank which we feel should look at global issues from Indian perspective, but also from the perspective mainly of the developing countries. And that's what this organization hopes to do in the years to come. A long journey is ahead, but in last 2 years, we have done quite a lot. And I'm going to ask Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, my very illustrious colleague, to talk about it a little later. But this organization has a vision to make sure that we actually work on these issues in an integrated manner. So one is a policy formulation where there is a problem, because if you don't have right policy, obviously the implementation will always be flawed. But even if you have the best of policies, if you don't implement it properly, again we have a problem. So we really need to work at macro level to form a policy, but also at a micro level when the implementation takes place. And that's what precisely this organization is trying to do. Dr. Arunabha Ghosh will tell you about how we are working in a state of Bihar, how we are trying to work in other places to try to find out whether we can create an integrated plan, not just for a state, but over a period of time for a district, and how we can use this knowledge, this experience that we have gathered from here for the benefit of other countries. At the same time, how we can learn from other countries to make sure that we also formulate a plan and implement them with not those mistakes which they might have committed, and with the best practices that probably we can get from them. And that is what precisely the CEEW is going to do over a period of time. We are extremely fortunate to have a very distinguished board. You can say, I should not say distinguished, because I am the only one, probably is an exception. But we have Mr. Jamshyd Godrej, who, as you know, is not just a leading industrialist, but a man with great heart and passion for these issues. We have Mr. Gautam Thapar. Both of them, I've seen how magnanimous they are, because they really provide a backbone support for this organization, and that's how we could walk this 2 years distance without much of a pain. So Gautam Thapar is another one. And of course, a glue that binds all of us together is Mr. Tarun Das, who actually is, really speaking, binds this environment, energy, and water together. So the CEEW is in fact the invisible bond in that is Mr. Tarun Das. And of course, we are very lucky to have a very knowledgeable, very accomplished person as a CEO, Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, who, really speaking, I have rarely met a person who can talk about all these 3 issues independently as well as together. So that's something, a very rare combination, and we are very fortunate to have him as a CEO, and we are really looking forward now to working more in areas like this. As I said, this is an organization based in India. We operate out of Delhi, but we really have a global vision. And in fact, in first few months of our existence, we signed an agreement with a province of Guangdong and a state of Maharashtra. Why we did that is they are the 2 most prosperous provinces in each of those countries. And these are the provinces which actually have an ability to change the way the development should take place in future. They're already prosperous, they have the wealth, but how are they going to now work on future in terms of transportation, in terms of agriculture practices, in terms of energy use, water management, how are they going to work? So we thought we'll sign an agreement between these 2 countries, and in fact, this agreement was signed because of the CEEW and Maharashtra government and Maharashtra governor of Maharashtra, as well as the governor of Guangdong, they signed the agreement. In fact, we want to really operationalize it, and I'm very happy that His Excellency, the Ambassador of China to India is here. So we'd like to work on that. As well as we have a very distinguished international advisory board, which has people from almost all continents of the world. So that's how we'll like to get a knowledge from each one of them to find out how this organization really becomes truly global. So it's an Indian think tank trying to work on global sphere. So very extremely happy that all of you are here, but I'm really privileged and honored by the fact that none other than the National Security Advisor, Ambassador Shivshankar Menon, has agreed to be the chief guest and also to guide us about how we can really work on this framework that I just mentioned. And in fact, he's the one who has the ability to actually make this happen, because he himself has articulated a concept of security does not necessarily mean the external security or the internal peace that we really need to maintain, but how can we get all this water security, the energy security, the soil security, the food security, all that mainstreamed into one single product. And that's something which we really look forward to that. I'll formally introduce Ambassador Menon. It doesn't need introduction, but as a formality a little later. But I'm indeed thankful to you for joining us, and really we look forward to this. I can see so many distinguished people who are sitting here in audience. Each one of them should have been here and talking about it. But I know you are here to lend your support to this organization, and we really value it a lot. So thank you very much, Excellencies, for coming. Thank you very much for distinguished ladies and gentlemen for being here, and we look forward to your continued association in the years to come. Thank you very much. Let me now request my friend, Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, to tell you a little more about how much we have done in just 2 years. And it is all has just happened in 2 years, mind you. When we'll tell you, we'll be really not believe it. That just could happen in 2 years. Yes, it is actually happened in 2 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhu. Ambassador Menon, Mr. Godrej, Excellencies, thank you very much for coming. I know you're here to listen to the National Security Advisor, so I'm only going to interrupt this for a few seconds. We've been in operation for 2 years. I'll take 6 minutes of your time, and I'll just showcase what is it that, who we are and what we've been doing. So as Mr. Prabhu mentioned, our mandate is to integrate energy, environment, and water issues, both as research outputs as well as policy inputs around the world. We are an international and globally engaged institution, and we conduct independent research. All our reports, all our publications are peer-reviewed, often internationally. So essentially, our mission is to address global issues in an integrated way. So the way we work is we try and take each level of governance, and then we try and see what's not being done. What do we need to pay attention to? So the global level, we work on what we call over-the-horizon issues, things that might not be immediately on the agenda of a policymaker, either here or elsewhere, but which we feel that you need to keep your eye on the ball over the future. So for instance, we work on energy trade and climate linkages. The climate world, for instance, wants that clean energy gets subsidized. The trade world says subsidies are bad. Now, how do you create a policy framework where investors are going to invest in sustainable infrastructure? We work on sustainability finance across the world. Our latest report has just come out focusing on new market-based instruments. We work on new technologies called geoengineering as a sort of plan B for climate change, but we work on the governance of it. How do you make sure that the downsides of these technologies are regulated and governed internationally? And as Mr. Prabhu mentioned, we work on international cooperation around the world. At the national level, we try and develop broad national level policy frameworks. We did one for the Planning Commission of India for the entire country's water resources framework for the 12th five-year plan. We've just completed a report on the National Solar Mission, the first independent analysis of the National Solar Mission, one of the world's largest solar programs. We produced the first report on global governance in India, and I have many of my more distinguished colleagues from this working group, Ambassador Shivshankar, Ambassador Ghosh, Mr. Kiran Karnik, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, Professor Radha Kumar. We all came together to think, how do we understand linkages between energy, trade, climate, finance, cybersecurity, and so forth. And of course, we helped facilitate R&D. We facilitated the India-US Joint Clean Energy R&D Center, bringing about 700 companies and research labs in both the countries together to try and form research consortia that could work on transformational R&D on clean energy. But ultimately, the proof of concept is at the state level or even down at the district level. Unless you can prove that something works there, all of this is only something that serves as ideas. We conducted water dialogues around the country, but more recently, we've just finished a report for the government of Bihar on reform of minor irrigation. Because that state, while it's growing really fast, it needs to grow based on its agricultural growth. If it wants to grow based on agriculture, it needs irrigation. Then you look at the landholding patterns in Bihar, 96% of the farmers are small and marginal. So big irrigation is not going to serve them. So we went to 5 districts in Bihar, did surveys with farmers, with water user associations, with irrigation officials, and we've created a framework. Now this is just the first input. Then we've got to integrate it with agriculture, with energy, and so forth. So essentially, that map gives you an idea that in the last 2 years, our global footprint across our thematic areas. And what we've achieved in the last 2 years is essentially we have about 26 research projects, 7 book-length research reports, 24 instances of being tapped as a resource for official agencies. We've promoted partnerships within governments, we've supported industry, and of course, we've organized networks around the world. Very quickly, this is our conceptual framework. This is what integration of these issues mean. In any country, in any state, in any district, you will have an energy mix. You will have water requirements. You will have environmental concerns. Often, if you try and solve a single problem, you will get those red lines, those trade-offs with other areas. And our objective is to try and find the co-benefits. There's no single answer at any level of governance or between one district and another. And that's why we need to take our ideas and go down into the field to make sure that we are getting the reality checks. So ultimately, how do we take our ideas forward? One of the key areas of our work going forward is going to be on resources efficiency and security. From point of origin to point of use, how do we improve efficiencies and thereby get to security? We're already one of the world's biggest importers of coal, for instance, but we need to build up our port infrastructure to import that. We've been a growing importer of oil, but then again, we'll have to increase our infrastructure to import and then transport the oil. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that the integrated approach is crucial at every level of governance. The international approach helps us connect the dots between these issues. And it's our independent research that lends us credibility. It's with those words that I want to thank you for coming. The main purpose of this evening is to listen to the National Security Advisor and to have a good time. And I hope you will. Thank you very much.
So I think the good time is just to follow now, because you are going to speak, so that's a good time. But just before that, let me formally welcome our chief guest, who is, as you know, a current National Security Advisor, one of the most important functions in the government in a world wherein everything seems to be insecure. And in such situation, National Security Advisor is one of the most, has a pivotal role to play in keeping not only the citizens secure, but also to create a sense of security, which he is supposed to do and he has been doing. Just before that, he was our Foreign Secretary, and in fact, we have other quite Foreign Secretaries here. So Mr. Shivshankar Menon was a Foreign Secretary. He has been an ambassador to China. He has been our High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and also he was ambassador to Israel. He played a very important role in the landmark civil nuclear deal that India signed with the United States. He had a very big role to play in that. Also, he was, in his previous life, responsible for advising policies on nuclear issues. He has tremendous experience in many of the issues, but also particularly, as I said, how do you now India articulates its vision about security, just going beyond a limited angle? And that's what we really look forward to listening from him. In fact, while I was reading this list, I suddenly realized that I've been few of the times when he was an ambassador, I was a minister and I visited. So I've seen how professionally he used to operate in those countries, how much respect he commanded. And in fact, his knowledge about the local issues of those countries was phenomenal. So we are very happy to have you here. I will request you to deliver a talk. I just forgot to mention one invisible figure when I was mentioning about a board. I think that's Kiran Pasricha, who I don't know whether she's formally on the board or not on the board, but she plays quite a big role. As you all know who know Kiran, that how effective she is. So I'm very happy that she's also here. So I now request Ambassador Shivshankar Menon to deliver his address and to have good time. Thank you.
Mr. Prabhu, Jamshyd, Arunabha, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for asking me to this event to celebrate the second anniversary of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. I think it's clear from the audience that you've gathered here that in 2 years you have carved out a very distinct and niche for yourself by taking an integrated approach to issues which are becoming more and more important to all of us. It's quite remarkable what you've done in such a short span of time. I first became aware of what you were doing when you did the report on global India and global governance, which set out an agenda for India on most of the issues of global concern, which was, I think, unique work. I don't think anyone had done that before. And it has, since I noticed, which is the ultimate flattery, spawned imitators. So that, I think, is proof of how good your work is. But today, what I thought I would do, since I know very little, some of you who know me know this, know very little about water, energy, resources. What I thought I'd do was to talk about energy and resources in national security. Not as a lecture, despite what it says there, but just to leave some ideas with you and to see then what we think of it. I think in the past, clearly, nobody thought that energy, resources, water had major national security implications. And the security calculus used to be dominated by military hard power considerations. But clearly, today, that's no longer so. Today, it's almost a truism. Everybody accepts that each of these, energy, water, all of them, resources, all affect national security. And there's a simple reason for that. If you look at it over history, I mean, the ability of military power to shape the economic environment, which for millennia we actually took for granted, is steadily declining. And that's a fact. I mean, in jargon, people like to say geoeconomics has taken over, is controlling geopolitics, rather than the other way around. But I think most people would agree today that in an interdependent international economic world, the international economic and political influence, and not just military capability, becomes a much more significant factor and a much more significant indicator and provider of national security. Unlike the Cold War years, today this globalized interdependent world has only one economic system. And all the significant actors, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's China, India, Brazil, all of us, we all compete in the same space, in the same world economic system for energy, for resources, for the sources of wealth and security. But I think the corollaries of this shift are less well understood. Geopolitically speaking, if you had to rank the instruments of state power in sort of usability, nuclear weapons superiority is the least usable. The next most unusable is probably military superiority. And it's the economic and political levers which are the most usable levers of power today in this world. The result is a turn to non-military weapons, levers, and things like, social media, cyberspace, pipelines, economic sanctions, energy, etc., become means for individuals, states, groups to try and achieve their security goals. And this is a profound shift. This is actually pretty basic to the way we do our business. We've seen just recently how the power of rumor, amplified by the social media, by the internet, by ICT, can move tens and thousands of our countrymen to leave their places of stay, of work, and flee. I mean, we've seen the power of these instruments today. And that has clear security implications. This is not a world that I think we've either thought through or understood yet. And my point is only that we need to change, therefore, the way in which we not just look at security. We all accept that the definition of security has changed, but at what the instruments and levers and what the factors of security are today. So this is why I think what you intend to do, and your future work especially on resources, efficiency, and security, is particularly significant in this context, because it comes in a profoundly changed context in which we are operating today. And you see this in each field. You look at energy security, for instance. In the last 2 years, we've seen in West Asia and the Middle East how shifts in energy availability and markets have profound geopolitical consequences. In the last decade, there's been a considerable shift in the energy balance in the world with new sources of fossil energy, whether shale oil, new oil and gas fields, changing the geographical distribution and the pattern of supply and demand and the old equilibrium that we were used to. To some extent, this remarkable growth in supply of oil and natural gas has been masked by high oil prices, which in itself is a consequence of equally dramatic changes in the pattern of demand. I mean, some of it I think we are responsible too, but also a phenomenal growth in oil and gas futures trading and hedging. I mean, that has been in the last decade. So when we look at our energy security today, for instance, supply is abundant, but risk and vulnerability is also much higher than it's ever been before. We have a very different paradigm to deal with. But what does this mean in geopolitical terms? It's interesting. In 2011, I think the US obtained less than 10% of her oil imports from the Middle East. Some people say that by 2016, this could be down to zero. New technologies and discoveries are said to make the US self-sufficient in LNG for the next 100 years. So the fundamental assumption that many of us have made was that the West would stabilize the Middle East and ensure a flow of cheap oil, which was essential to all these economies. But I don't think we can make that assumption anymore. The Middle East now accounts for less than 16% of global recoverable reserves. And the new fields are in new places, in Brazil, in North America, Central Asia, other locations outside the Middle East. So in some senses, people can actually afford the turmoil that we see in the Middle East. People can actually afford regime change. Now, these are immediate security consequences of a shift. So there are geopolitical consequences to what we see happening in what traditionally we only regarded as an energy market. And we looked at it purely as and that's a big shift. And that's the kind of shift that, frankly, I think there's similar and significant shifts also occurring to a greater or lesser degree in other resources. I mean, whether you look at coal, at iron ore, copper, rare earths, certainly you've just seen all of which I think you will be studying as you go forward in your work. Now, I don't want to just frighten you and say all this has very negative consequences, it should be frightening us. Same shifts mean huge opportunities for us, but you need to be quick, you need to understand them, and you need to deal with them very differently from the traditional ways in which we are used to dealing with them. And that's why I think what you do here, this integrated approach, looking across the board, trying to, and the studies that you're planning to do, I think that's why I think they're so important. I have one thought, though, which I think is politically very incorrect, and I don't think anybody here will support me. I personally think that water is in a category by itself. That, there's a lot of talk of water wars and water as a security issue. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to be that most of our planet's surface is water. So if it's an availability issue, it's really an energy issue. It's the energy you need for desalination. That it's not a water issue. I don't know of a single war over water in history. I don't think that's ever happened, even though we keep frightening ourselves about this. But also, it's the nature. I mean, there are specific limited military uses of water in some locations, perhaps. But I think we overestimate the security implications of water issues. Water issues are issues. They're serious issues. They're issues of life and death, but they're not issues in the sense that energy and so on have been, not security issues in the sense that, but as I know this is politically incorrect, and to say it to you is probably the worst thing to do. But I'd be very happy to be proved wrong and to be shown how we should deal with it. One last point. The geopolitical impact of energy and resource issues also has significant implications for global governance and for governance within countries. But we're in uncharted waters here. Oil and gas resources have been the subject of international contention long enough that, most states have understood their significance and have some idea of how to relate to the private players, the individuals, the firms, and so on, who play a major role in their exploitation, exploration, etc. But this is not true for the other resources. When you look at things, as I said, coal, iron ore, rare earths, and so on. And nor is it likely that the power to allocate these resources, both globally and within states, is going to be given up very easily by the small groups who actually control them today. And that's the potential source of trouble, as far as I can see. We are wrestling with some of these issues every day in India. You see it in the media as well. But this is despite the fact that when you take the larger view, energy, several resources of strategic significance, even cyberspace itself, could be considered global public goods in the real sense of the word. But existing global governance regimes and even market mechanisms for these goods no longer cope with the situation that we have. We've seen this. You look at food security and food commodity prices and what's been happening over the last 5-6 years and the security implications of that. So we need to adapt them, and the more work you can do on that kind of interface, I think the more useful it would be. So my apologies for inflicting a random set of thoughts and a whole set of demands of what we would like to see from you. They're probably irrelevant, then ignore them. But if not, what I would like to really urge you to do is to regard energy, resource security, not only as a question of efficient and assured access and distribution and supply, but in the larger sense of their impact on the security of states, peoples, and individuals. Thank you, and thank you for being so patient with me. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Shivshankar Menon, for the excellent speech that you just gave. The formal part of our evening, ladies and gentlemen, is approaching to an end. I'd now like to invite our co-chairperson, Mr. Jamshyd Godrej, to deliver a vote of thanks. After that, soup will be served on your tables, and we'll proceed to the bar for drinks.
Thank you, Prachi. Shankar, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, my deep appreciation for your being here this evening. CEEW has a very ambitious program, as you've just heard, from Suresh and from Arunabha, and our board, which is quite small actually, and is really very, very engaged and thrilled that we could engage not just with all of you, but with the country in how we can integrate these ideas. And I was particularly pleased that Shankar talked about the economic levers in strategy today in a geopolitical sense. And I think that we have to appreciate that our economic development and growth is to a very, very large extent going to depend on the way that our programs and strategies on energy and water and the environment play out. I think that the connection with, for instance, health and how health costs and health and well-being of our society is really going to get impacted by this, by these programs is, I think, very, very critical. I was talking to some of the very eminent doctors in Bombay a few days ago, and they were telling me that the number of cases of cancer that they are now seeing has grown 10 times compared to just a few years ago. And I think that these externalities of these type of very, very critical issues are going to really determine our well-being and our economic development to a very, very large extent. And I think that all the studies have shown how energy access and access to water and sanitation, really makes a huge difference in economic development. So I really appreciate your approach that it is these very, very crucial and critical issues that is going to determine our economic future and our well-being. And I personally believe very, very strongly that there is a huge opportunity for us to look at renewables. India has a huge potential in wind, a huge potential in solar, a huge potential in bio wastes which can be used for energy, etc. And I think that the integration of all these issues is very, very crucial. I was very struck a few days ago to read about the future of food and the future of how food security and the quality of food is going to play a huge part in the future. So I think that these are, for you, Shankar, I think from a security point of view, in the broader sense as you have laid out, very, very crucial for all of us. So thank you very much for your thoughts this evening. Really appreciate that. We are so thrilled that Suresh Prabhu is chairing this initiative because his experience, not just as being Minister for Environment, Energy, and all industry, etc., but that his engagement in these issues is so strong. I think that we are really very, very fortunate to have you, Suresh. So thank you very much for everything that you are doing for this. And I think Arunabha has, in this very, very short period of 2 years, has really raised the research and intellectual profile of CEEW to a very, very great extent. So Arunabha, really appreciate your efforts in this. And I think that it has been a very big journey in a very short time. And we look forward to working with all of you to engage in these very, very crucial issues. So thanks. Yeah, that's right. And we really do want to appreciate. Would you like the whole team to stand up, the CEEW team? Please do stand up. So from one person running CEEW, we now have a very, very young and engaged team, and all praise to you, Arunabha, for putting all this together. And finally, I hope you do enjoy this evening. Please do be very engaged with each other and with us. and we look forward to doing this over and over again with you. Thank you.
One of our premier companies, Gen Irrigation, is also bought over some, it's probably going to be the largest company in the world. But the way you have, optimize the utilization of water.
And in fact speak to it. Why did you think such environment?
I did. And young, and and he speaks well, and I have a feeling that's how they
It is where you posted, you do a lot of work in the capital. Here I feel the crux of it is how engaged is the CEO. If the CEO is not personally going to touch the line, we need that we are going to spend.
But just about how they have to stop construction and how this reflects the crisis over water and